Today I want to talk to you about that time I bought an RV and I hated it. I don't know what I was thinking, but van life, digital nomad, all this stuff was all around, especially on YouTube. And I decided, I get bored easily. So maybe I need to try out van life, be a digital nomad, do something different. And I like to move house. I like to do that. I don't get stressed out when I'm going to move somewhere. I love it. So I thought, great, I'll get to move every day if I want to. I can just get in the driver's seat, move myself. So I bought an RV. Specifically, I bought a 2000 Pleasureway. It was a Dodge chassis or whatever, and it was a Class B, so it was a van size, and it was a wide body for my wide body, and it was in very good shape. The gentleman I bought it from had taken excellent care of it. I don't know how many owners it had had. He didn't have it that long, but the reason he said he was selling it was because where he and his wife lived didn't allow any type of RV to be parked on the property. And he had to pay for storage, and they just didn't use it enough. So who knows? It sounded good. It sounded plausible. So the price was right. I liked it. So I bought it. $20,000. And this was several years ago. And at the time, there weren't a lot of them available. And the ones I did look at before this one were sometimes in really crappy shape. And I thought, I don't want a junker. I don't want something that's going to break down and hasn't been taken care of and smells or anything. And I didn't want anything like that. So I felt lucky to have found this one. And let me back up a little bit. I had sold my house, sold my car. Actually, I still owned my car until I bought the RV because I did need to get around. But I was staying with a friend after I sold my house and actively looking every day, every minute of the day that I could, find something to look at. I would look, and then I would go see him, and usually it didn't pan out. It wasn't something I was interested in. But when I found this one, it looked right. It had a little, tiny bathroom with a toilet and a little sink in the corner, and it was a wet room, so you could theoretically use the shower and the whole room would get wet, but everything was plastic or whatever, and it was fine. It was meant to get wet. I never used the shower. I didn't use so many of the features. I did not. So it had that. It had a little kitchen. It had a oven, burners on the stovetop. It had a sink, had cabinets. I did love it. It had a little pull-out drawer where you could put canned goods or whatever. Had, overhead storage. It had excellent storage for the size of the thing. That was not an issue. It had a full-size closet where I could hang winter coats or extra clothes. It had 2 beds along the back that you could rejigger and put. It had a table. You could put the table out and move the mattresses so it was just one big bed. It had storage above the beds on each side. It was actually very nice. It had a little built-in TV with a DVD player, and it came with a ton of DVDs. It was hilarious. It was all these old, no, not DVDs, I'm sorry, VHS tapes. It was a VHS, the long ones, you plunk them in and the tape starts rolling. And the guy, I don't know if he bought it that way too, that it came with this TV and DVD player and all the I keep saying DVDs. It's not. It's a CD. It's a VHS player. I don't know what my problem is. So I don't know exactly how that happened, if he inherited them like I did or if he bought them. I don't know. But it had lots of movies to watch on VHS tapes. That was kind of interesting. Then it also had a little built-in safe, and he told me the combination. He said, you can change it. And I said, no, I trust you to not come and get into my safe, because he knew the combination. And that was great. I could keep my passport in there and extra money and, feel pretty safe that my safe would take care of it. And it did. It also had 2 seats up front. They would both swivel. I swiveled this passenger seat around once. Like I said, I didn't use the features. It had an awning that you could pull out outside and have a little shaded area. I did that once with the help of some friends. It had, a freshwater tank. It had a gray water, freshwater, gray water gas tank. Anyway, it was a vehicle that I lived in. It was an RV, Class B RV. Like I said, I bought it for $20,000. And while I owned it, I bought a freshwater hose so that I could use that to put fresh water into my freshwater tank. It wasn't like an old garden hose. It was brand new. I could have used an old garden hose. I don't think it would have mattered. But I splurged on that big purchase, and I had the oil changed once. And I did have to buy a new, I don't know what you call it. It's a hose you hook up to empty the tanks, the black water and the gray water. The black water is the sewage. The gray water is like if you put water down a sink, it would go in the gray water tank. And I learned you empty the black water first, then you empty the gray water to rinse the hose out, because that water is relatively clean. Let's just talk about that little thing there, emptying the tanks. I learned how to do it. I could do it. I didn't like it. It made me nervous every time I had to, and I didn't have to do it that often because it was just me. And anytime I could, I used a toilet inside a store or a restaurant or, someone's home, whatever. I used my toilet. I loved it. That was great. It was a luxury. It just was, it was a toilet. It was great. It wasn't exactly like in a house, but it was pretty darn nice. So 2 different times when I was emptying my tanks, that hose, one time it broke. Well, the first time it came loose. I didn't have it attached correctly because you have to kind of shove it on there and twist it to screw it on. And I didn't have it attached correctly. And the sewage came pouring out on my shoes. That was gross. So I stopped it real quick. There's a little thing, a lever or something. I don't remember. I've blocked a lot of this from my mind. But I turned it off so that it didn't continue to keep gushing. And then I attached it with my hands. I don't know if I was wearing gloves or not, but it was disgusting. And emptied it. Then another time, maybe a couple weeks later, the hose broke. And again, the stuff just went everywhere, and I couldn't empty it then because the hose was broken. It wouldn't attach onto the opening of the sewage outlet or whatever. So I did buy another hose for emptying the black water and the gray water. Those are the things I bought. A freshwater hose, a hose to empty my tanks, and I got the oil changed once. I don't think that's bad. So those were my expenses, and I am not complaining at all about the expense, those kind of expenses of having the RV. That was it. It was probably less than $100. So I am not complaining at all. I never had a breakdown. I did have my windshield get cracked. I was driving on a highway and a truck threw a rock and hit my windshield, and it just went across. And I had to get that replaced because, it's not safe, and it is illegal sometimes to drive with a cracked windshield, but the insurance paid for it. That was great. So those were my big expenses, which weren't much. And at the end, I'll tell you how much I did. I bought it for $20,000, and I probably put in about $100 on minor little expenses. And then at the end of the video, I'll tell you how much I sold it for. So I'm sure you're wondering why I hated it, because it really wasn't, a problem. Those things I just mentioned didn't happen often, or, that wasn't a big deal. So why did I hate it? Well, to me, it was too expensive. I owned it outright. I had sold my house. I had the money to buy this thing. But I'm a very, very thrifty, frugal person. And in my previous mode of transportation, I had a small compact car that got about 30 miles to the gallon. Well, this thing was close to 20 years old. Or maybe it was 20 years old. I don't think it wasn't quite 20 years old. But it got 8 to 10 miles a gallon. And it had let me check, about a 25-gallon gas tank. So depending on the price of gas, it cost, and how low the tank was on gas, it cost around, $50 to $80 to fill it up. And it was like, oh my God, that's ridiculous, But it was my home also. I didn't think of it that way. So I felt bad that I was wasting gas. That's what I thought the whole time. It's like, this is a waste of gas. This is really bad. I'm very environmentally conscious, and I like getting good gas mileage. I like running errands together so that you're not wasting gas. Well, unless I stayed in one spot, I had to use gas, to get places, to move my home around every day or every couple days or every week or whatever. I just didn't like that. It felt wasteful and very expensive to me to put that much gas in a vehicle, and it only got me about 200 miles with the 8 or 10 miles a gallon. I just didn't like it. It did not sit well with me at all. Another thing about being frugal, I had trouble figuring out where I was going to stay each night. I mean, I stayed everywhere free. I never paid one night to park my vehicle and stay there. Never went to a campground, never went to an RV park, never. I stayed in casino parking lots. I stayed in friends' driveways. I went out in the Arizona desert and I went to the RTR, the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous, and stayed there about 2 weeks, and then I followed some people around that I met, and we went over to a lake by Yuma, Arizona. That was beautiful. That was the best spot. I backed my RV up very carefully because it was too big to drive. I hated driving it. And I could look out my back window, and there was the lake. It was gorgeous. And we stayed there probably close to a week. That was really nice. I didn't feel uncomfortable. And the RTR, that was good. There were people around, in the same boat. Some people were staying in their cars or in a van that wasn't an RV or whatever. And I think I needed to do more of that, to be around other people in the same situation. But I had stayed in my RV long enough ahead of time to where I was determined that it wasn't for me. within the first 2 weeks, I knew this is not for me. It didn't feel like home. I like to be home. I'm kind of a hermit, and I didn't have all my stuff around me, my crafts and I had books. I made sure to have plenty of books, and I would go to bookstores or thrift stores, and I made sure I always had 2 or 3 extra books on hand. And, but you can't read all the time. And the Wi-Fi was never predictable. I had an old iPhone, and I used a prepaid plan, and so it was roaming all the time. It would not hold a charge because it roamed all night trying to look for a cell phone tower, and I didn't know this for the longest time. I kept thinking, my gosh, it just won't stay charged. So I'd get up and turn the engine on in the RV, plug it into the deal and charge it enough. Sometimes I went inside a casino and charged it, whatever. It was a problem. And the Wi-Fi was not great most of the time. And that was not great for me. And I just didn't care enough. I knew I wasn't going to do this. I just knew it from the beginning. Once I'd done it a little while, I was like, okay, big mistake. So I never looked into trying to get some other kind of Wi-Fi situation that would have made life more comfortable or made me feel like I was connected. So there were just a lot of things that you take for granted being in a house or an apartment or whatever. And I hadn't thought about them. And I don't think I could have just read about it or realized it until I did it. And that's okay. I'm glad I did it. Living in the RV. Let's get back to that. It had the kitchen. It had a little sink, and you had to turn a pump on to get the water to come up, because you have to learn how everything works. And it's not like your house. It's extra work. And I never used my kitchen. I had a microwave, I used that. And I had to turn the generator on to get the microwave to work. So I used the generator, and it was loud, but I didn't care. It was fine. It would run the air conditioner. I had a rooftop air conditioner deal, and I used it to run the microwave, and I had a fridge, and I used it to, I don't know. I can't remember what the fridge ran off of. I think if the vehicle was running, it ran the fridge. I'm not sure. It was a lot to keep track of, and I hated it. It's like, I just wanted to work all the time, just like at a house. And it wasn't the same, but I wouldn't have known if I hadn't tried it. So, cooking. I never used my propane stovetop or oven because it was very cold one time, and I turned on the propane heater or furnace or whatever it was, and it smelled. Oh my God. I have that other video about smells. I can't handle certain strong smells. Propane's one of them. It gives me a headache. And it was very cold, so I ran it part of the night, but every time it came on, it went whoosh, this big poof of gas, I guess, and then it lit, because I could see blue flames also, like in the little grate of the thing. I don't know. I didn't like it. It felt dangerous, and it stunk, and that loud whoosh woke me up every time it came on. And then, because I'm a very light sleeper, and it was just annoying, and I turned it off and just bundled up more, and I never used it again. I never cooked with it because I knew it was going to stink. It's like, it's not going to not stink. It's going to stink. It just was not good for me. The fridge was an issue. It was work to keep it going. So I finally bought a little styrofoam cooler and ice, and I used that part of the time. I understood that. I understood how that worked. It was just strange. It was very strange for me. And this was in the winter, and I knew the summer would be worse because it would be hot, and I hate being hot. because this is a metal little structure. You know, it's metal. Metal gets hot in the heat. So I decided I don't want to do this. So I made a little sign for sale, and I put it in the window of my RV. And this was after having it just probably 2 months, because I knew I don't want to do this. This is, I tried it. I didn't like it. So I put a for sale sign in it in the window. And I can't believe I've neglected to mention my cat. I had a cat when I had the RV. He's gone now, which is so sad. I loved him so much. He was wonderful. And I just miss him all the time. But he just adapted to the RV like it was nothing. It was no big deal at all that we didn't live in a house anymore. We lived in this moving vehicle thing. And he would lay up on the dash whenever we were parked, and I had to get a wire cage for him to travel in, because he would get up on the dash when I was driving and stand up and block my view. I mean, he was huge. I couldn't see out the windshield with him there, so I had to get this crate type thing. It was like for a big dog, but I put him in it because I wanted him to be able to walk around, and I had a water bowl in there for him. And so he just traveled very well. He had his litter box, and he would eat and drink his water, and he loved it. He seemed to love it. And we would go outside when we were parked, and there's one picture here of him with his harness on a leash, and that worked pretty well for a while. But he was a smart boy, and he learned how to back out of that harness and get away, and he got away twice. Luckily, I was able to catch him, but, cats are very fast. So I was really afraid that I was going to lose him, so I just stopped doing the harness thing and walking him, and then I would just carry him around. So that part of the RV was great. Loved traveling with my cat. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention trying to drive this thing. It was, to me, a very large vehicle, because it was, I think, 20 feet long. And I think my car, I think I looked it up later, maybe 16 feet long. I don't know. But it seemed enormous, like gigantic. And you sat way up high, the driver's seat was way up there, and you lorded down on the other little drivers as you passed them on the highway and stuff, and I didn't like that feeling. It was weird. I didn't like it. And I like driving a small car. It's just, I'm more comfortable, I'm short, and I don't feel in control driving a bigger vehicle like that. So that was a problem from the beginning. And when I test drove this thing, the guy that was selling it had me drive it. And, I wanted to make sure I could drive it, and it was fine. But after I owned it, maybe just a couple weeks, I was driving on the highway, and it was very windy, and I could hardly keep that thing in the lane of traffic. If it had been windy when I test drove it, I would have given this up. I would have just owned my car, and I would have said, okay, I have to go find somewhere where to live, because I wouldn't have done it. It was awful. It was nerve-wracking. It made me nervous. I thought about it for days. Like, oh, I hope it's not windy again when I have to drive. I mean, it was very stressful. Did not like that a bit. So the bottom line was, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like home. It just was not for me. I can tell, like, if I go look at a new house or something to live in, I can tell whether I'm interested in it just by how I feel in it. And I think that's probably common, maybe. And I couldn't have figured this out, obviously, by just stepping inside of it and driving it. I had to actually experience living in it. And I'm not sorry I did it. at all. I am very glad I did it because I don't want to have regrets in my life. I'm not interested in saying, oh, I wish I would have done that. I just do stuff because if I want to do it, I figure I should do it, give it a try. And lots of things haven't worked out. And I'm fine with moving on. Doesn't bother me a bit. I was wrong. I'm going to do something different. That's how I am. I'm fine with that. And I think one reason it didn't feel like home or didn't feel comfortable for me was that I found out I didn't like the driving around, being somewhere new all the time. I like going on vacation and seeing new things, but I don't need to do that all the time. I'm not interested in that. So I learned that when you live in an RV, that's your life. You have to always find somewhere new because you can't stay somewhere forever. You have to keep moving. Generally, if you park somewhere, you can do it for a while, but then you have to move. Like the casinos. I think they allowed 7 days and then they wanted you to move on, which makes sense. It's like they don't want a bunch of RVs just there all the time. And that was stressful for me. But one thing that I loved about it, I slept like a baby every night. I have insomnia as a rule, and I slept the best probably in my life in that RV because I was exhausted. I think I was stressed out and exhausted all the time. I would turn off that light and zonk out. So that part was good, but not really good because I don't think I felt right. It wasn't healthy. So, do you want to know how much I sold my RV for? And I owned it for 4 months. Just 4 months. 4. And I actively tried to sell it for about 2 of those months. And I stayed with family and friends any chance I got. So I didn't live in it full time for 4 months, maybe 2 months total. But I stayed with different people and, I just told them I don't like it. I'm not going to do this. And they'd say, oh, well, if you want to come stay. It's like, okay. I did because I could shower. Like I said, I never used the shower in the RV. I paid for showers, several of them. There are places like in Quartzsite, Arizona, there was a beauty hair place, a beauty salon, whatever, a barber shop, I don't know what you call it, who they had showers. And you could pay, I think it was $8, and go in there and take a shower. So I did. I took a shower there. I paid for a shower at a park. They have the buildings, the little restrooms. They had showers in the back. I did that. I never went to a truck stop because they were like $19 for a shower. I thought that was too high. I was like, I'll just stink. Pardon me, but I'm not paying that. I showered at friends and family houses, at their houses. I just went without a shower a lot. It was gross. I didn't like that part either. I was itchy. It was bad. And, that was my own fault. I could have paid for a shower more often, but I did not. Again, I thought it was too expensive. It just wasn't for me. And I still haven't told you how much I sold it for. $20,000. I paid $20,000 for it, and 4 months later, I sold it for $20,000. I was thrilled. So it all worked out. And I tried it. I hated it. And I moved on. And I'm okay with it. It was fine. I don't wish I hadn't done it. I'm glad I did it. Like I said, I would regret it if I hadn't done it. But I tried it, and I knew right away it wasn't for me, and that's okay. What about you? Have you ever done something like this? Like sold all your stuff? And I did put things in storage. I didn't sell everything, but I sold a lot of stuff. And have you ever done that where you maybe bought an RV or you sold everything and traveled or whatever? How did it turn out? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Was it okay for a while? Are you still doing it? I would love to hear, because I think it's fascinating and it's great to have these options. I think it's wonderful. So I look forward to hearing in the comments what you think. Would you do this? Have you done it? Let me know. And I appreciate you all watching, and I will see you next time.